Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, Jim,
Good afternoon.
Jim, Adam, Amanda, Jay. Okay, okay, we got some horsepower here. Nice. I hopefully we get somebody from Onyx that's joining us. They had a wonderful, wonderful event last night at their facility in Kenilworth. Adam,
Adam's here from Onyx.
Adam's here from Onyx. Okay, Adam, were you there last night?
Yes, hi Jeff. Yes, I was there. Heard you speak loud and clear.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah, it was a fun event.
Yeah, your site, by the way, just driving past that central plant is a candidate for fuel cells. You got the thermal heat, thermal cooling, and electricity component all in one place.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It was my first time there actually, so I was very surprised. I got lost, so it was very interesting to figure my way around, you know.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out how to get in. I left.
You made it.
I drove around for 25 minutes and the meeting was already well in. I said, that's it, I'm going home.
Wow, it's pretty wild.
I know, I know.
Uh,
But it was a good time, yeah.
Good.
yeah, we missed you. Connie is now officially installed as president.
Yeah.
She did a nice job last night. Very, very good.
I would expect nothing less. Connie's great.
All right, Heather, I'm thinking it's 7 minutes in.
Yep, I would go ahead and start.
The good start. All right. All right. Well, everyone, we had, by way of report from Heather, we had 20 people register, and who you see on the meeting is who you see on the meeting. So uh, I think we're charging $10 for member for registration now, and to try to get people to stick to their guns and actually show up for these meetings. But welcome all. Thank you all for being here, and appreciate the people that are here. You are all decision makers in your properties, so that's a good thing. All right, so my name is Jeff. I'm chair of the Energy Sustainability and Resiliency Committee, and this is a 1 hour webinar on the power of fuel cells for commercial office buildings. I want to relay some remarks I shared with Mike and Michael of Fuel Cell Energy and Bloom Energy a little while ago. And that is the capacity rates in New Jersey as of February of this year have literally doubled. We're seeing capacity go up from, I got numbers here, so I have them in front of me. Capacity going up from $11 a kilowatt hour to $21 a kilowatt hour, and that's on the energy supply side of it. There's an additional capacity charge on the distribution of your power. So New Jersey has a 3-year rolling average. So we're only seeing 1/3 of the full load of the new capacity rates in New Jersey. As New Jersey has this 3-year moving average, as that basketball moves through the snake over 3 years, we're going to see an even higher capacity rate. So one of the benefits of fuel cells is they literally truncate your capacity cost by providing a base load. So keep that in mind when you look at your budgeting this year and you look at your capacity tags. Keep in mind how that might make fuel cells more economic for your facility. All right, a little bit of administrative. We want to let you know, first of all, this program is sponsored by your Energy Sustainability and Resiliency Committee. Thank our committee members. I thank our committee members, Jay Greeley, who's with us, Mike Bertolo, Kevin Kelly, Nina Kovalenko, Tiffany Lewis, Bob McSound, Bobby Malone, Steve Olivetti, Tom Pico, Grant Salmon, and Irina Vukovsky. Thank you for all your help and your support during the program, developing these programs over the years. I'd also like to thank our annual sponsors. Our gold sponsors are Encore Fire Protection and First Onsite Property Restoration. Our silver sponsors are AJ Squared Security, Encon, and Northeast Group. Our bronze sponsors are Belfour Property Restoration, Colliers, Dry Clean,
Woo!
Commercial Service Care, Federal Business Centers, Guardian Service Industries, yeah, woohoo, Colliers, GLL, Plan Companies, Public Sewer Service, ServPro, Team Majeski, and Spinell Electrical Contracting. As you go along, type your questions in and we'll aggregate them at the end. Presenters, if you'd like to take questions during the presentation, just let everybody know. So our first presenter is Michael Mills Price. He's a licensed professional engineer with Bloom Energy. He's a senior engineer with a master's in electrical engineering. He's a member of the energy transition team at Bloom Energy and responsible for assuring Bloom's technical product offerings seamlessly integrate as part of Bloom's comprehensive energy solutions. So what you buy, he makes sure that it's going to work. So with that, I'll pass the mic over to Michael Mills Price. Mike, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Make sure the slides are working here. Oh, I think that was your slide. All right, so today I'm going to talk through, well, shameless plug. We're a public company at Bloom Energy, so I'm going to give a little highlight on Bloom Energy. And then we can talk a little bit about why you're paying more for electricity this year than last year, and will next year and the year after, and some potential solutions, fuel cells in this particular case, to help assure your resiliency of supply and really the long-term energy costs for your building assets. If there's a question that can't wait, absolutely dive in. We're a pretty small group, looks like 12 or 13 people on here. So feel free to jump in. If you'd rather wait till the end, type it in the chat like Jeff mentioned. We'll circle back at the end of the presentation, and it's going to be, roughly 20 minutes. High level, Bloom Energy, again, we're a public company. Last year, about $1.5 billion. We've deployed well over a gigawatt. I think we're approaching something much, much north of that, but publicly shared over 1.4 gigawatts of energy servers throughout the world. Our primary markets are really in the US, Japan, Asia, and then growing in Europe. But traditionally focused for the 20 years of life of the company, we are a US manufactured product in San Jose and a second manufacturing facility up in Delaware. We're publicly listed under BE, the New York Stock Exchange. Some of our customers, so again, these probably resonate with some of you as well. We have the cloud service IT customer. We have your traditional consumer retail, food and beverage. Some of these names, obviously, you'll recognize. Manufacturing industries, biotech, pharma, higher education. We serve a very diverse set of end customers, depending on what their energy needs are. And in most cases, as you'll see with our technology, it's either a grid parallel approach where you're trying to reduce your total energy cost, or for new emerging markets like these data centers we continue to hear about, it's a time to market play where you can't physically go and buy the infrastructure to get your facility online as fast as you would need to. But again, we serve a diverse host of clients. I'm happy to talk about any individually, but not specific names. All right, why are energy costs going up? So we have a myriad of things happening all at the same time. We have us as consumers continuing to increase our load usage, right? We have more demand in terms of electricity, and yet we're also trying to retire some existing assets, these coal and traditional assets that have helped power the grid for many number of years. In addition to that, putting the infrastructure in to serve these new load bases is very costly and has a large CapEx requirement, which is why you see this 3-year rolling average, even in New Jersey, continuing to drive up your price. The utilities are trying to amortize that cost to deliver this electricity to you over the entire rate-based population. And so as things get more costly, you're going to pay for them more at the back end in terms of your energy rate. Specifically in the US, for the last, we show 2000 to 2024, but even if you go back further, for the last 40 years, the electricity market has been this really slow growth market. So we see this, 0.5% CAGR year over year. Going forward, we see a natural increase due to some of these factors, the AI data center load, so that we can do more unique things more quickly with our energy. We see electric vehicles driving up demand. We see just general number of TVs and things inside each individual residence more today than they were 5 years ago. And so we're using more electricity, and as such, we see the growth of the electricity market really starting to take off. Again, it is driven by some of these larger projects primarily, but there's other underlying things that are happening to help drive up this need for additional electricity utilization going forward. We talked a little about retirement. So we're trying to get rid of coal. I would say nuclear is actually holding its own today due to some of the needs of the electricity market, but we see this natural retirement of these, these carbon emitting resources. That combined with the increasing capacity requirements of us is really, again, we have multiple things pushing for a need for lower cost and more resilient energy going forward. If we think about the US mix itself, and this is from the Electrical Reliability Corporation on the left, you have certain geographical locations where, the elevated risk associated with power capacity and really shortages is amplified. And what the table on the right shows here is in some of these service locations, the interconnection time for you guys as asset owners, if you want to bring on additional load to serve your customers who are leasing space, right? You might be dealing with multi-years out to be able to get those things interconnected so that you can actually serve the electricity to them that they are requiring. And these are the primary aspects that really help sell the fuel cell technology or alternate, gas turbine technology into these locations, because your customers want to be online next year, 12 months, 14, 16 months out. But if you go to the local utility, they're talking about something that's 3, 4, 5 years, which has got to be an impediment to you moving folks into those warehouse spaces and getting them online to do what they want to do the manufacturing, to do the food production, or whatever that might be. As you see here, the average on this chart is 37 months, but for some of your guys' local territory, you're much beyond that even in terms of the interconnection queue and getting that new capacity alleviated for you. All right, this is kind of a base slide. I'm not sure how technical the folks are on the phone, but just, you have these generation resources, these large generation resources that are then being stepped up to transmission and then being redistributed in and around the city location as a nice little cartoon graphic. The congestion is really starting to happen on these transmission lines. These are those expensive, time-consuming, costly things to upgrade. If you were able to take and source the generation local to the load, or at least some portion of the local load requirement, it reduces the impact on these transmission lines, which allows your interconnection queue to move forward much faster and for you to have your customers up and operating, manufacturing, doing the things they need to do in a much shorter time frame, which generates more cash for that entire business envelope. Transmission is a bottleneck. Again, we can speak to this over and over and over again, but as you start to retire resources, putting in new resources and then feeding that to where the load actually exists is a huge undertaking. We talk about all the transmission infrastructure that needs to get built. You can see how much transmission infrastructure was built year over year. This trend is going in the wrong direction to meet this increasing load demand and increasing use of electricity, right? If this was growing up and to the right, then we would be building more transmission to support the load. But honestly, less and less has been built over these last few years. What that means is going forward, in addition to bringing on these resources that generate electricity, we need ways of distributing that electricity out to the actual load. And so you can start to see these individual, legs of a stool, if you will, all pushing towards local generation at the point source of need. Also, and this is something that Jeff just touched on, right? This is a US trend. It's not just a New Jersey trend. We are seeing the delivery cost of the electricity up and up and up. And it's nice that you have a 3-year rolling window so you don't get hit with it all at once. But nothing is suggesting that this curve is going to turn downward anytime soon. And so you're going to continue to pay more for this electricity year over year over year, unless you can find alternates to lock in those fixed costs over time. Again, beating a dead horse here a little bit, but these infrastructure investments take significant amount of construction and planning and right of ways. If we're talking about things down in the low voltage circuit, which is kind of the transmission or the electrical lines you see outside of your house, we're talking about a year and a half-ish to get those put in. Large power transformers, when we get in that 40, 50 megawatt type installation, we're looking at somewhere close to 2.5 years just in the procurement cycle. So you place an order, by the time you get the transformer arrive on site, you're looking at about 2.5 years. Everything to the right of that is an estimate, but these things are very costly and very time consuming to get in. And if they haven't already been planned a decade or a half a decade ago, the impacts of putting them in likely won't start to result in net benefits to you for these periods of time, right? 8, 9, 10 years out. Okay, I'm going to dive into technology a little bit, and then we'll circle back and put all this together for it, and even to the comment to low carbon and some other things. So fuel cells are different than a natural gas turbine or a reciprocating engine. There is no burning inside of a fuel cell. It is truly a chemical reaction that is taking place. On one side of the system, you have natural gas coming in. On the other side, you have ambient air. The chemical reaction creates electricity. We then use that electricity, that's DC electricity. We use that electricity, convert it to AC, and feed it into the local building. But it is no burning, there's no combustion, and if you are to do carbon capture, it's a much more refined carbon stream coming off of this. So it's much simpler, much lower cost to do carbon capture on the back end of a fuel cell than it would be with like a turbine technology. Inside the actual system itself, you have these individual cells. Those cells are stacked up. Those individual stacks are put into a module, and then we start to get into the energy server and energy farm. But effectively, what's happening at that cell level is what you see at the top, the chemical reaction. And what you have coming out of these energy servers is clean, usable power at scale and in bifurcated chunks that you can meet whatever building load you need. So as an example, if you need 3 megawatts, right, we put in 10-ish energy servers. If you need 30 megawatts, we just scale that up appropriately. But that's the basics of what's happening inside of the fuel cell platform. And each of ours at Bloom Energy, this power module is about the size of a, I don't know, like your refrigerator at home, something like that. 3 by 3 by 6 feet, something like that. Just to get a sense of scale. Some installations to help drive that home. Here's one up in Pennsylvania. This is an islanded microgrid, so completely off-grid installation for this case for a semiconductor manufacturing facility. This was a space-constrained installation in South Korea where they had to go vertical due to the physical footprint allowed on the ground. Automotive manufacturer in Europe, and then a larger kind of utility scale project in Delaware, really close to our manufacturing facility also with the 27 megawatt installation. But just some practical applications of our products installed, both on the East Coast and overseas here. Okay, let's get into the actual solution itself. So Bloom sells fuel cell products. But inside those fuel cell products, there are some deviations into how they're actually utilized. So for base load power, if you're just trying to lower your demand charges or trying to lower your need from the electrical utility by generating on-site electricity to offset some of your load, you would fall into this primary power case. And let me walk through the columns and rows here because I think this really gets to the meat of the discussion. So Bloom is connected effectively in parallel with your electric utility grid for this scenario. The building has some load, and I do apologize, this is probably small on some people's screen, but this squiggly line is the building load or your customer's load throughout the day. The Bloom output would be the large square wave here, where we are supplementing grid power. And if the grid was to go away, the Bloom system would shut off and stop operating as well. So there is no microgrid or backup power for case one right here. But under this case, you can significantly lower your electricity cost depending on the gas costs at your point of interconnection, because again, we need that natural gas, and doing that comparative rate versus the electricity cost or the projected forward electricity costs that you're paying to your local utility. A second condition for folks that need a off-grid solution as well. So if the utility goes away, the fuel cell can continue to operate to serve those critical loads. Bloom has a solution for that as well. It's the same basic setup, except off of the Bloom solution, we have a critical load bank that would continue to serve stuff that needs to be served long-term, whether the grid is there or not. Similarly, we have it where it rides through grid outages without dropping load at all. So in this case, it drops load and then forms back up. We have solutions where it continues to operate no matter what. And of course, like the microgrid one I showed above, we have solutions where you don't need the electrical utility grid whatsoever. The Bloom system will continue to serve your building load, and you're just paying the gas in feed rate for that. So basic, different combinations, but different buildings, different clients, different customers might require separate solutions. And this is kind of that full energy mix from connected to the utility grid to, hey, I don't want to connect with them at all. Trying to cover that whole spectrum. These have been proven under a number of different conditions, right? Like I said, we've had fuel cell installations for 20 years. We have gigawatts of these things operating out there. Some pictures, this is West Coast fire, I think last year or the year before. You have utility outages, earthquakes, typhoons. It's a resilient solution. And they are installed up and down the US and across the landscape. Value proposition. So some of the things your customers might care about, right? Load following, can it keep up with a flexible load? These are things we talk about in terms of demand charge mitigation. If you want to, reduce your chance of having to pay that peak demand charge for a 1 month period, having a solution that can balance that load in time allows you to reduce the chances of getting charged with that. Reliability, we talk about from 3 nines to 5 nines of reliability. It really is a decision based on what your end customer wants to do. We can add some additional capacity to help serve that load. And because these are modular solutions, it allows you to meet and achieve these much higher levels of resiliency, if you will. We talked a little bit about time to power and some of the larger CapEx equipment. In this case, Bloom can deliver in 6 to 9 months. So if you have a client that's really aggressively trying to move into a manufacturing schedule or needs electricity in a short amount of time, providing that bridge power is something that we do all the time, right? We can help reduce that lead time to get up and operational due to the nature of co-locating the power generation with your facilities. And somebody had mentioned on the sustainability side. So again, we talked a little bit about carbon capture, and I don't want to dive off into that too much, but we can start at looking at the CO2 equivalent emissions for different types of generation assets. So combustion turbines, gas turbines, reciprocating engines, and you can see down here where the Bloom solution is relative CO2 equivalent emission in pounds per megawatt hour. And again, there are bolt-on solutions to help reduce this to carbon neutral going forward. So just kind of level sets in a world that's looking at, hey, where's our electricity coming from? Why are we retiring these coal assets? What are we replacing them with? Is that better for the environment? These charts here really help frame that up. Why fuel cells are a logical choice as you're looking at increasing your energy portfolio. Again, marginal grid emissions, we start looking at across the eGrid subregion, and we look at across the national grid emissions for Bloom, United States, Germany, South Korea, right? Comparing these in our target markets, we're much below those CO2 pounds emissions. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but certainly if you have follow-up questions on this front, we can answer them in detail. In terms of procurement, because I'm also actively supporting the sales team, there are really two options here. So if you reach out to Bloom, if you like the fuel cell solution and want to understand it more, there's like a CapEx purchase option. You buy the equipment, we can do a service contract, maintain it, but you own that equipment long term. Or you can do a PPA, where you're effectively just treating the Bloom solution as an electrical provider, and we charge a tolling rate just like the electrical utility would, but we handle all the equipment, the CapEx, and the service and installation. So just wanted to provide those two avenues as you're thinking about your customer and how you want to manage your money. Would a CapEx investment or something more like a long-term PPA better fit your needs? We offer both of those as end solutions. And then flexibility. So today we're talking about, natural gas fed. There's a lot of work in the hydrogen space. There's a lot of work in biofuels and all these alternatives. The base platform for a fuel cell is the same. So the manufacturing, the supply chain, all the things that Bloom provides is the same. If you have a biogas application, I don't know that applies here for the BOMA group, but if you have a biogas application, we have a solution for that. If it's just a natural gas application, great, but effectively you're future-proof. So if your fuel source needs to change going forward, let's say some blend of hydrogen plus natural gas, the end solution from Bloom is largely the same, and that we will be here to help flexibly integrate that for you as your needs change or as your customer needs change going forward. They've got maybe one more slide. Nope, that's it. So at this point, I'll wrap up. I think I'm pretty close to 20 minutes, Jeff. Yeah, pretty close to 20 minutes. So if there's questions, we can take them now, or we can wait till after Mike's presentation.
Yeah, very good. Very, very good. Thank you for your remarks, Michael. And got a good picture of the Bloom Energy System. I put a few comments out there for the group, and I thought it was very, very important what Michael said about using marginal CO2 emissions. It's a very, very common mistake that customers use as they try to use the average CO2 emissions, and that's not accurate. It's a very complex calculation to get to the marginal CO2 emissions to match the solar plant load or the fuel cell load with the grid and what plants are operating at each hour of the year. Those are the plants that get offset, and those are generally the plants that are the dirtiest and the most polluting. And that's effectively why it's important to use marginal emissions calculations. It is a complex calculation, but it is doable. We do that, and it's important to keep that in mind when you're evaluating these plants. So I have just two comments. I'll say we have enough time. Anybody have any questions for Michael before we move on to Fuel Cell Energy's presentation? Right.
No, thank you.
Very good. All right. All right. Well, next up is Mike Palmer. He's with Fuel Cell Energy. He's the Director of Business Development. Mike is a certified energy manager, that's CEM, and he's Fuel Cell Energy's Director of Business Development. Fuel Cell Energy specializes in efficient and clean energy solutions. His focus is expanding the company's market presence and fostering strategic partnerships to develop and advance fuel cell energy's applications. So everybody, please welcome Mike Palmer.
Thank you, Jeff. Glad to be here. Michael did a great job explaining everything. I mean, we basically, that's it. I don't need to really talk about it a whole lot, but what I tend to do a lot of is fuel cell 101s. What I've found in over 10 years of doing this with fuel cells is most people don't understand what a fuel cell actually is and does. I don't necessarily mean to get into like super technical on the PhD side of the chemistry, because honestly, most of us and our customers especially don't really care what happens inside the box as long as the box works, right? So that's the key. So I'm going to go through some basic stuff. I suggest anybody who has a question, feel free to jump in. I like doing conversations more than just pitches and talking from slides. One of the first things I tell every customer or potential customer I deal with whenever they ask a question about fuel cells is the answer is it depends. It always depends on the application. These things tend to work better if we're very specific with the applications. It's not something that we say will fit everywhere. I'm sure Michael will agree. I'm not like the solar sales guys where it does everything and makes coffee too. It doesn't do that. I mean, they're very specific applications that these work well in, and there's some that they don't. And I've been the first one to tell customers that it doesn't really fit. Look for something else, kind of thing. So just as a quick one for us as Fuel Cell, we've been around since 1969. Since then, we started basically as an R&D firm. Did a lot of technology research on cells and cell technology in itself. We went public in early 2000. We are headquartered out of Danbury, Connecticut. Our primary manufacturing is in Torrington, Connecticut, where we have a location in Germany. I never try to pronounce that town because I can't. And then we have our solid oxide manufacturing up in Calgary, Canada. It's primarily R&D with a small manufacturing component. And you'll know a little bit more as we go along the difference between the solid oxide and the carbonate technology that we have. Basically, we have two platforms. And when I say platforms, we make the cells. And the cells then get put together into a module. I'll get into that a little bit, just because there are certain terms when you're talking to fuel cell companies that are a good idea to have in mind to understand. Again, you don't necessarily need to know the chemistry and where the electrons go and which ions cross what electrolyte matrix, all that kind of stuff. That's neat to know, but you don't need to know it. But you do need to know some basics about these things. Our two product platforms are carbonate technology and a solid oxide technology. In the fuel cell world in general, when you go out to the marketplace and look for fuel cells, there's two basic applications. You have basically stationary and motive applications. We specialize in the stationary application. A motive application means it has wheels, basically. It's that simple. The motive applications, you'll hear technologies like PEM, maybe alkaline. The solid state or the stationary ones, you'll hear applications such as solid oxide, carbonate, and phosphoric acid are the primary ones. Now, you can use any of the motive application technologies to be stationary. It just usually takes more of them to equal the same amount. There is a difference between each technology. They all do basically the same thing at the high level. But there is a difference, and that's where, like I said earlier, the idea of it depends on the application and what you're trying to get at. So our focus areas very similar. We do a lot of biogas. If you have a location that has biogas, for example, wastewater treatment plants with digesters, things like that, we can utilize biogas. That helps with your carbon footprint because then these things become completely carbon neutral, which is great. We do carbon solutions, which is we capture the carbon for utilization. Primary market for that is food and beverage, and we've just begun tapping into that area. The food and beverage industry, primarily the beverage industry, as everybody knows, you have soda that has bubbles. Bubbles come from CO2. They need it as a raw material, literally. Then there's conventional C&I, commercial and industrial, and that's basically everybody else. And then the latest market to be blown up is data centers. So just to get everybody baseline, I like to go through a quick, terminology discussion. The first part of any fuel cell is the cell itself. And you can see here a picture under the stack there. It says there's two pictures there. There's a gentleman holding a carbonate cell. That's about 2 feet by 4 feet, and it's roughly about a ½ inch thick. The other stack there is our soon to be released solid oxide technology. That one, there's no reference there, but that is a 17-inch high stack. The cells themselves look very much like a CD. That's what they look like, and you just stack them up in there. So we take a cell, we put them in a stack. The stack then it goes into a module. All the module is a box. That box then is part of a system. You do need things around it to make it work. You got to have fuel conditioning to bring the fuel in, and you have to have electrical conditioning to take the electrical signal that comes out of these, which is a DC signal, and put it into a usable signal for whatever application you have. This, again, just another one. I like pictures. I always like to use pictures. Gives you a better idea of our system and what it looks like. These modules are the smallest size are 1.4 megawatt or 1400 kilowatts for an output. So we don't do a small module size, we do a fairly large size. And you can see here, this just shows the different areas of the equipment. There's what we call electrical balance of plant, mechanical balance of plant, and they do different things, and it's listed here very simply. Don't need to get into the details unless you really, really want to. This, again, just a diagram of what's happening. Obviously, methane, natural gas, biogas, various types of fuels that have basically a methane component come in through the anode side. The nice thing, and this is the carbonate technology, the nice thing with the carbonate technology is you can actually get multiple value streams out of it. You can get not only power, that's the primary use, but heat. We can capture the CO2. We can actually capture water. We can actually capture some excess hydrogen as well to be used for people. So this is where I like to talk a little bit more. This is more specifics about applications. And this is where, does it make sense to use a fuel cell in your application? Again, the carbonate technology has a multiple variety of outputs that are available for it. One of the big things with carbonate compared to the other technologies out there, like phosphoric acid or solid oxide for stationary, is it has a significant heat component. And you'll see that a little bit more as we talk about I have a slide on the combined heat and power applications. The majority of our customers are combined heat and power applications. Main reason being is you take one fuel source in and they're getting both power and heat out of it, thermal use. We can help reduce their thermal use, for example, if they have boilers or something like that on site, significantly, and save them costs that way. And again, just for the data center guys out there, this is a typical functional diagram of what we would look at. One of the other things we do is the carbon capture. Right now, the carbon capture, especially in New Jersey, people talk about carbon capture from a green standpoint. To be honest, I don't know too many areas in New Jersey where you can sequester carbon. So typically, more often than not, you look at it as an added value stream. We've worked with a lot of the industrial gas companies who are very, very interested in using larger fuel cell facilities as offtake for CO2 because they sell CO2. And that way they can use that CO2 instead of having to develop their own plants. This is just a Design concept, we're working with a company called O&G for a facility up in Connecticut. This concept is a 35 megawatt data center with gas capture on it. So we would capture the CO2. One of the industrial gas companies would come pick it up. They would have that as a value stream. The owner is a co-located data center owner of the building. They would offer the power. They would offer whatever heat might be needed in a chilling standpoint. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then the CO2 is an added value stream for the owner of the building. A lot of the fuel cells, most of the ones we do are in microgrids for very basic reasons. Most customers who buy on-site generation buy it because, well, if the grid goes out, I want to keep running. Why would I not? Why would I have an on-site generator if I can't keep running? So I like looking at pictures, like I said, these three examples down here below. We have the Woodbridge microgrid, which is a high school. That's actually the high school right there. There's actually a classroom on the other side of those brick walls. This microgrid services about 7 primary buildings throughout the city, and it's there for emergency purposes. It does the town hall, emergency services, the library, a grocery store, a gas station, and the high school. They're also using the thermal energy to help supply heat to the high school. The high school has a swimming pool, and as you can imagine, to heat a swimming pool is very costly, so we use the thermal energy here and saves them cost on doing that. University of Bridgeport, very similar. The neat thing here to notice is this blue building is actually one of the dean's homes. And so these units are quiet enough that it doesn't even bother. We have a nice surround around it. We put a wall around it. You can surround them with whatever you want to cover it up to make it look good. But again, this is a microgrid. We cover 80% of the campus needs. If the grid goes out, we keep running the campus. University of Bridgeport is actually a FEMA site for New York. Don't ask me why. I don't know how they expect evacuation of New York in an emergency situation to get all the way to Bridgeport easily. The traffic today is brutal, but that's what that's set up for. Pfizer is another one out here. This is 2 of our 2.8 megawatt power plants, so it's 5.6 megawatts total. Pfizer's an interesting one. They already had a microgrid at their R&D campus in Groton, Connecticut. They had a 30 megawatt combined cycle system at the facility. Their problem was they do a lot of their testing for the FDA, and the FDA requires very firm power requirements because if when you're testing one of the instruments dips because of a power dip or anything else like that, you have to start over. So you can imagine if you have a 6-month test and in month 5 you all of a sudden dip, FDA says start over. That's significant amount of money lost for the Pfizer, the drug company, because they can't get their drug out to market that quickly. So they decided to use the fuel cells to basically power 2 buildings first. The on-site cogeneration system, the combined cycle system, is a backup to that, and then the grid is a backup to that. Mentioned earlier, combined heat and power. The majority of our systems are this design in the sense that we utilize the power, the heat. Examples here, very simple. You have Trinity College up here on the upper left. This one also has a nice example of how it blends. I mean, these things look like large industrial facilities, but we were able to make this basically disappear into the campus. This fencing is something they picked, not a problem. We could put that up. It matches fencing they use elsewhere on the campus. This ramp right here leads right up to their athletic facility, which is in the background here. And literally across this parking lot is a whole set of townhomes for college housing. So it's right in the middle of the facilities in their campus, and nobody's the wiser. Below it, this is Pepperidge Farm. They're actually using this for both powering the systems that they use, and also the heat is used because they need a lot of heat in their process. And that helps them save a lot of money on running their boilers, that they don't have to use extra fuel to do that. And this graph is nice because I like it. It just shows a little idea of, what you can get from these. As I mentioned earlier, the multiple different types of technology out there. For example, I compare our carbonate to our solid oxide. The solid oxide is electrically more efficient, which is nice. However, if you need heat, the heat coming off of a solid oxide maybe give you some hot water. Typically, I like in real world terms, it's good for domestic hot water, but you're probably not going to generate steam, and you're definitely not going to drive an absorption chiller. We talk about data centers. We have a design for the data centers where we use our unit and we can do a 1-to-1 ratio, basically delivering the same amount of power as you would thermal or chilling energy to that facility, the data center. So it gives you an idea down here. We can drive a chiller, get about 200 refrigeration tons out of each module. And then we have grid support over here, where if you put enough of these things together, obviously you can drive some steam turbines, basically is what these are. So we add some more extra power. This is a 14 megawatt site in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And there's an added basically 1 megawatt of Rankine cycle turbines. These are just 2 pictures. Again, I love pictures. Pictures of our 2 grid support sites in the States. This one is Derby, Connecticut. The neat thing with this is these are actually on platforms. We're in a flood zone here, so we can put them there, even though they look like they may not be able to. It's not a problem. This is the Bridgeport one I just mentioned. These are the 2 that we have in the States. We also have one over in South Korea running that's about 58 megawatts right now as grid support. Mentioned digester gas or biogas. If you have access to that, it's a great fuel to use. One of the things or the problems with this gas is it tends to be very dirty compared to like pipeline gas, so it needs to be cleaned up. We looked at third-party companies to do the cleanup for us in the past and decided that it made more sense for us to just design it directly to feed the units. It ended up being cheaper and a better way of doing it for our systems. The fuel cells in general, all of them are very sensitive to fuel input, so you have to be very careful on how you condition that fuel before it's put in. And there it goes. Just again, mention the CO2 recovery, what's there. And this is more from a standpoint of utilizing the CO2 as a value stream, especially in New Jersey. There are different areas of the country where this makes more sense for sequestration. But for the most part, you're probably going to utilize it. One of the nice things we can do is the unit actually can act like a scrubber for combustion devices as well. So if you have a facility that has existing boilers or a turbine of some kind or some kind of combustion device, we can actually take the flue gas from that device, feed it through the unit, and capture about 85% of the CO2 that's coming off of it. So that can help if you're in a sequestration area of help reducing your class 1 emissions and that type of thing that you look at from a standpoint of what you're emitting for CO2. This one's really neat. This is our what we call a Trigen. As a project out in California with the Port of Long Beach, primarily for Toyota. Toyota owns a big section of that port because they bring over the cars from Japan, basically, to the States there. One of the major cars they bring in is the Toyota Mirai for the California market, which is their hydrogen vehicle. They needed a way of fueling it because you can't ship cars and boats with full tanks. So they come over with an empty hydrogen tank. They need to fill them with hydrogen before they can move them around. So they needed hydrogen. They also wanted to be able to support the port with a green energy source. One of the things that happens on these ports is when these big ships come in and dock, they go into what's called a hoteling mode. Usually that means they want to run their diesels to do boat power while they're sitting at the dock. However, in the state of California, like a lot of the states are now, you're not allowed to use diesels to do hoteling because of the emissions. So you have to use shore power. Well, in California, shore power is very, very expensive. So Toyota wanted some way to provide green power to support their ships as they came in, so they didn't have to go to the grid. They're utilizing all this as green power because they're actually using directed biogas in California. California has a program where a lot of the anaerobic digesters, they had a big program years ago to kick off digesters where they can then create that gas, that digester gas, clean it up to renewable natural gas standards and inject it in the pipeline. And now they buy directed biogas through the pipeline. So they're a net zero emitter. The other interesting thing here is they're actually using the water. We're giving them about 1,400 gallons a day of water. Well, why, you would say? Mainly because they got to wash the cars. and using the local water supply from the state or the local municipality tends to be very expensive. So they use the water that we create. So that's why we call it a trigen. They're basically taking power, hydrogen, and water off of this unit. And that's about it. I mean, it was quick. I mean, Michael did a great job going through the rest of it. I just wanted to hit on some of the highlights. In summary, I think, just to remember from a standpoint of when you're looking at the potential of these things, remember what is it that your basic goals are. If it's cost control, is it resiliency, is it sustainability? They do affect all of those areas in certain ways, but like I tell all my customers, it depends on your application. It depends on what you want to do, which technology works best. How do you package it? There are different ways of putting these things in that make sense in some applications and don't in others. So that's about it, Jeff.
Oh, Mike, that's excellent. That's excellent. I think I put a few comments out there for everybody, and it pretty much reflected what, Mike, you just mentioned at the end. That is to, know what your objectives are. As someone that's been in New Jersey for almost their entire career and very, very close to regulatory policy and watched New Jersey develop its efficiency programs and, now with the 2019 Energy Master Plan, its programs to eliminate carbon-based fuels and move towards wind. And I posted these comments. I'll just touch on them briefly. We're really heading for a train wreck in New Jersey and for a lot of the country. People realize suddenly, we knew this a long time ago, that wind and solar are intermittent generators and they don't have capacity. So for every wind plant we put up, we've got to build an iron in the ground real power plant to back it up. It's not often told, but you get a superstorm Sandy or any storm where the wind speeds exceed 50 or 55 miles an hour, those wind blades can't handle the stress and they feather the blades and the wind plants just stop spinning. So all those wind plants, when you need them most during a storm, are all going to be sequestered. And backup power is going to have to be bought. We're seeing the price of that backup power now starting to reflect in the energy markets with the latest auction we had in February. We need more backup power than we ever thought we needed. Plus, we have data centers being developed in the PJM marketplace that are projected to increase the load 2% a year for God knows how long. So a lack of capacity combined with the growing capacity means supply and demand laws take hold. We're seeing very, very high capacity costs in the marketplace. And I see it for the next 3 years at least, and then we'll see a leveling off, and that'll be the new norm going forward. But our goal here at Bowman, New Jersey, is to empower property managers and people in the business to know how to identify direction for their owners or for their clients. And depending upon what the owner needs or what the client needs, the objective of this webinar is to give people the information to understand and to know the next step to take. And the next step is, we have opportunities for cogen fuel cell type systems that you've talked about, Mike, where you need hot water, you need steam, and you need electricity. Michael has got the solid oxide fuel cells where it's a straight electricity supply, highly reliable. Depending upon what your needs are, the technologies are right in front of us here to figure out, where to go and what to look at to take care of what your clients need, what your owner needs, what your tenants need. I'm thinking, what I'm thinking of is, owners or managers that have central plants, you're looking at Fuel Cell Energy Inc. Owners that have, straight commercial office, all electric, you're looking at a Bloom Energy application. So, everyone has at their fingertips the right places to go to be able to start to, figure out how to solve challenges that you're faced with. So that's where I am. I say, does anybody have any questions for Michael or Mike?
Well, Jeff, there's that one question that's on the chat. I'd just like to say, because it's a good example of it depends type thing. Would this work for a high-rise residential building heated pool? Yes, absolutely. However, right, because I've done a lot of work with urban development and urban high rises. to put packages together for them, that they have pools, they have heating needs, things like that. It depends on the space. Obviously, you can see from the pictures, the Bloom option is much smaller footprint than the fuel cell, that option, the carbonate fuel cell at least. Our solid oxide isn't available yet. But, if you have a heavy urban area, I would say look at it from a standpoint of where can you put these things? You can probably put a Bloom box somewhere very, very easily on urban areas. In fact, I know, and Michael could back me up on this, you guys can put it up on a roof kind of thing. Depends on the size, right? Obviously. But you can do that. Our carbonate, you would not put on a roof. We can't do that. From a standpoint of the heated pool, very simple. We look at the application. I mean, do you need, and you run some quick calculations to figure out the numbers. I always look at it from a standpoint, well, does it make sense to over-generate power and generate it electrically, the heat? Or do we take the heat off of the unit? If it was a carbonate application, and meaning you had the space to put the carbonate, I would definitely say use the heat coming off the carbonate. If it's a solid oxide application, it may make sense just to over-generate power, just from a cost standpoint. And that's where you get into the cost analysis of these projects, and that's a big part of it.
Michael, did you have anything to add to Jay's question about the high rise and using fuel cells to heat pools?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not specific to the high rise. I agree with what Mike had said. But I mean, what we're starting to trade off here is there's a constrained energy supply for electricity. And we have this other energy supply, which is natural gas. And it's prolific and it's much quicker in most cases to connect a natural gas pipe to a facility or increase it than it is to get that electrical that we talked through here in the beginning of the hour.
Mhm.
So, as long as you understand that gas price versus the electric price, we can run numbers and see if it makes financial sense for your building application or for your customer's building application, whether this, going forward is the right solution.
Yeah. So the answer is it depends, and we have to look at it. And,
Yep.
and we've got the companies here that can satisfy just about any application I can think of that can come up in the Bowman, New Jersey community. And I think we've got a good jumping off point. If anybody needs to talk about this technology, they've got some information to start off with, and people to talk to, people to call. As a matter of management and managing and maximizing the asset value of your property, it's just important to be mindful of these technologies. As you see costs go up, demand costs go up. There's a 3-year increase we're going to be seeing over the next 3 years. You're going to see capacity costs continue to increase for at least 3 years, is the Jeff Grant projection. So whatever pain we see starting in June is going to continue for June of the following year and the following year. So keep this in mind. Any other questions, anybody? All right. All right. Well, I'd like to thank our two speakers, Michael Mills-Price from Bloom Energy and Mike Palmer from Fuel Cell Energy. You guys did a terrific job. I think this show, you got to take the show on the road. It's great. I like to get it in front of the NAIOP New Jersey people as well. Those are the developers that are always looking for opportunities to take a piece of land and turn it into a money machine. So maybe that's something we could do in the future. But great program, great information. This will be posted on the Bowman, New Jersey website. The entire presentation will be there. If anybody wants to catch up on it and read it or listen to it again or refer it to their management, it'll be there. And with that, I'd like to thank the attendees for joining. Our next event is May 15th. It's again a webinar. This one's going to be a hybrid webinar. We're going to do it both on site and remote. It's going to be on interior and exterior plant landscaping. This is going to speak to the sustainability element of our committee, energy sustainability resiliency. And the sustainability part is bringing the outdoors indoors with real life in the form of plants. Kevin Kelly of Kelly Mac and Bobby Malone of KMF Companies are going to be hosting that webinar for us. Stay tuned for where it's going to be held. We'll have it on site. If you want to attend in person, and we'll also have a remote doing one of those Facebook Live type things. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do it, but one of our committee members, Rezi, from I can't remember the name of his company, but Rezi from Nina, what's the name of Rezi's company?
Isn't he Ciliano? Is that right?
Right, yes, from AJ Ciliano.
Yeah, he's the facility manager there.
He's one of our committee members. He promised to handle the the remote access doing the Facebook Live for us. So that's all coming up on May 15th. First time we're trying a hybrid event. So it could be a lot of fun. It could be a lot of learning curve experience, but I hope you can participate, and that's May 15th. Heather, thank you for facilitating everything, the flyer, the advertising, and helping us promote this webinar. I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you all for participating, and we look forward to seeing you in May. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.